It was supposed to be an ordinary family keepsake, just a faded photograph in a dusty frame. But the moment Daniel lifted it from the attic floor, he felt something impossible. The picture exhaled. A wave of cold air brushed against his skin, as if the smiling figure inside the image had just taken a breath. What began as harmless curiosity soon spiraled into obsession, terror, and a chilling question he could never escape. How can something that no longer lives learn to breathe again? Daniel Cross had inherited his late grandmother's house, a creaky Victorian structure filled with relics of a life lived long before he was born. As he cleaned the attic, he found a wooden chest sealed with rusted latches. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was a photograph of a young woman in a white dress, standing in front of a garden gate. Her eyes were focused directly on the camera, not soft or painted, but disturbingly present, like she was waiting for someone. Daniel didn't recognize the woman, but something about her expression felt aware, almost attentive. When his fingers brushed the glass, a faint mist fogged the surface from the inside, as if something behind it had just breathed out. He froze, convinced he'd imagined it, until he watched the condensation slowly fade like breath on a cold window. Over the next few days, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. He decided to hang it in his living room, telling himself it was just an antique with a strange vibe. But the more he looked at it, the more unsettling details emerged. The folds of the woman's dress seemed subtly different each time he glanced at it, as if caught between two moments. Her lips appeared slightly parted, almost like she was about to whisper. And worst of all, more than once he could have sworn her chest was rising and falling, so faintly that he wasn't sure if it was real or just the flicker of light from the window. He began to doubt his own senses, blaming eye strain, fatigue, anything but what he was truly afraid to name. Then one night, the house fell unnaturally quiet. Daniel sat alone on the couch, the photograph hanging just across the room. At first, he thought the sound was coming from the vents, a soft, steady rhythm, almost below hearing, like someone breathing in their sleep. The sound drew him to his feet. He followed it, step by step, until he stood directly in front of the frame. The breathing wasn't behind him. It wasn't in the walls. It was coming from the photograph itself. He leaned in, heart pounding, and as he stared into the woman's eyes, the glass fogged again, just slightly. Her pupils seemed to sharpen, focusing directly on him. Her lips twitched. The soft mist on the inside of the glass blossomed and faded, as if an invisible mouth were exhaling. The whisper that followed wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It bypassed the room and went straight into his mind. Daniel. His name, spoken in a voice he had never heard before. He stumbled backward, knocking a vase to the floor. Shards of glass scattered at his feet. When he finally looked up again, the woman's expression had changed. Her smile was wider now, too wide, carrying a hint of something that felt almost triumphant. Sleep became an enemy after that. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face waiting behind the glass. When he opened them, the photo was there, silently watching. Determined to explain it all away, Daniel turned to the only thing that made sense, the past. He spent hours digging through dusty boxes, old letters, and brittle paperwork left in drawers and trunks. Eventually, he found a torn wedding certificate and a faded obituary. The woman in the photograph was Eliza Cross, his great-grandmother. The obituary said she had died at 19. The official cause of death was listed only as respiratory failure, but someone had scribbled different words in the margin in an old ink pen, stolen breath. The document hinted at rumors that Eliza had become obsessed with the idea of cheating death. There were notes about seances, whispered pacts, and an old family story that one Cross ancestor had tried to bind a human soul to an image so it could keep on living. Every few decades, a family member reportedly encountered Eliza's photograph. Some claimed they heard breathing, others swore her eyes followed them. In one case, a relative disappeared without a trace, shortly after describing the photo as too alive. The pattern was always the same. One air, one photograph, and something that seemed to grow stronger every time it found a new witness. When Daniel tried to be rid of it, the situation only grew worse. He took the frame down and tried to burn it in the fireplace, but the flames refused to catch on the paper. He tore it into pieces, only to find the photograph whole again the next morning, neatly hung back on the wall. He locked it in a drawer. It reappeared above his bed. Each time it returned, the image was clearer. Eliza's skin looked less like ink and more like flesh. Her eyes had a faint gloss, reflecting light in a way that photographs should not. Her breaths, once shallow and occasional, became deeper, more regular, like lungs growing stronger. One night, he woke in the dark with the suffocating sense that someone was standing over him. His chest felt heavy, as though something was pressing down, forcing the air from his lungs. When he reached for the bedside lamp, his fingers brushed cold glass. The photograph was lying on his pillow, inches from his face. Eliza's eyes were open wider than ever, her smile almost relaxed, like she was watching him sleep. For a moment, he couldn't breathe at all. Every inhale felt like a fight. He shoved the picture away, gasping, his vision spinning. The next morning, he noticed something even more disturbing in the bathroom mirror. His reflection looked thinner somehow, not in his body but in his presence. His eyes seemed dull, his skin pale. When he exhaled onto the mirror, there was far less fog than there should have been, like his lungs had less air to give. Meanwhile, the photograph in the living room looked richer, more vibrant, as if it had stolen color from the world around it and drawn it into itself. As his days blurred together, Daniel's breathing worsened. He would wake at night, choking, with the sensation that something was pulling the air directly out of his chest. The photograph now showed Eliza with one hand slightly extended toward the edge of the frame, fingers curling outward, reaching. Her dress seemed to ripple, as though wind was blowing through the garden behind her. In the background, the once still leaves looked caught mid-motion, frozen halfway between one place and another. Neighbors later said they heard frantic gasps and thumps coming from the house in the early hours of one morning. The sounds didn't last long. By the time the noise stopped, the street was quiet again. When the police eventually entered the house after a concerned neighbor called, they found Daniel in the living room, slumped on the floor beneath the photograph. His eyes were wide open, his face frozen in an expression of pure terror. There were no wounds, no sign of struggle. The paramedics said his body was strangely limp, his lungs completely collapsed as if every last breath had been drawn out of him and never returned. The officers who documented the scene couldn't help but notice the photograph on the wall. The young woman in the picture was no longer just standing at the garden gate in a vague, artistic blur. She appeared almost lifelike. Her skin had warmth, her eyes reflected light like glassy orbs, and her lips held a faint, satisfied smile. Most disturbing of all was the presence beside her. A second figure now stood in the garden, just slightly behind her shoulder. His face was unmistakable. It was Daniel. His eyes in the picture were wide with terror, his mouth parted as if mid-silent scream. His chest, rendered in ink and shadow, looked as though it were rising and falling in a slow, agonizing rhythm. Daniel Cross was breathing, inside the photograph. After his death, the image was taken as evidence and locked away with care. The officers sealed it in an airtight evidence box, cataloged it, and stored it deep in a climate-controlled vault. That should have been the end of it. But over the following weeks, the staff began to talk. A few of them swore that when they passed the shelf where the box rested, they heard something, so soft they almost dismissed it. A faint, steady breathing, like someone asleep just beyond a wall. One night, a guard on duty insisted he heard a muffled whisper of his own name, barely audible, as he walked past. When he opened the box to check, the photograph looked exactly the same as the day it was logged. And yet the woman's expression seemed, to him, just a little more pleased, a little more alive. Rumors spread among the staff that the image had changed again. Some claimed there was now the faint outline of a third figure forming at the edge of the garden, like someone caught halfway between worlds, still blurred, still incomplete. No one could say for certain. Officially, the police report lists Daniel's cause of death as unexplained cardiac arrest. Unofficially, the story is very different. Now the photograph sits in the dark, surrounded by silence, but silence does not always mean stillness. If you ever find yourself sorting through old belongings in an attic or flipping through forgotten albums at an antique store, pay attention before you touch anything. Look closely at the faces in the photographs, especially the ones you don't recognize. Watch the eyes, study the lips, and most of all, listen. If the glass fogs from the inside, if the image seems to move when you're not looking, if you hear the faintest hint of breathing where there should be none, walk away. Do not say your name aloud. Do not whisper back. Because some photographs are not meant to capture a moment. Some are meant to capture you. And once they learn your breath, they may never let it go.